Hi everyone, Yana is here and you're watching the Clean and Simple Die Cutting video series. For my today's video, I decided to use my dies in a somewhat unusual way. I wanted to make a stamped image with them, so I pulled out some of the dies from Spellbinders from their Imperial Gold line and I experimented a bit. So I've already gathered some supplies for my card, and here I have a white card base, which is about 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I have a die from Spellbinders, and if you look closer, you can see that the one that I'm holding, the one that I'm going to be using, is gold. Now the other regular dies from Spellbinders, they're different in color, and this is how you can tell if the particular die is going to work for this technique or not. So this technique that I'm showing you today is only going to work with the Imperial Gold dies. Now I also have some different ink pads in different colors of inks. Some are from Clear Snap and then another one is from Tsukineko. I also have some stamps from Hero Arts. I have some washi tape that I will be using for various purposes. In today's video, I also have a little pin that I will be using to poke the paper out of the die, and of course I have a die cutting machine, which is an Artisan Explorer die cutting machine from Spellbinders. So before we start working on today's card, I wanted to show you a bit more and talk a bit more about these Imperial Gold dies from Spellbinders. So as I mentioned before, they are gold in color, and you can easily tell them apart from the regular dies. Now these are the only dies that can be used for this stamping technique. Spellbinders call this letterpress technique, and I'm thinking this is actually the word for it, but I like to call this technique stamping with dies. Kind of gives it a little bit more mystique to it. So here are a couple of examples that I did using some of the dies that I already have, and here on my table I have dies from two different die sets from Spellbinders, and I will be sure to link to both sets in the description area underneath my video, or you can always find a supply list on my blog. So here are different examples using different kinds of inks, and I've experimented quite a lot with it. I tried pigment inks, I tried chalk inks, and I even tried some dye inks for this technique. Now for today's video I'll be using chalk ink, but you pretty much need to see which kind of inks you have, what kind of ink pads you have, and test them and see what works best for you. So I'm going to be using this splash ink from Clear Snap, and it's one of their newest colors, and I'm going to start by adhering a little piece of washi tape to my die. Now because I'm going to use a die as a stamp, we all know that you have to place a stamp on a clear block. Now I can't actually place a die on a clear block, so I'm going to use washi tape as a handle and make sure I'm able to hold my die. So I'm attaching two pieces of washi tape to the ends of my die, and I'm going to hold it this way. Now I'm placing my die on top of the ink pad, and I'm barely touching it with my fingers. I'm not pressing, I'm not applying any pressure at all. I'm just barely touching it and making sure I don't have a lot of ink there. Now depending on the kind of ink pad that you're using, so ink pads are really squishy, I guess, so you really have to test and see how much pressure you need to apply to get that ink onto your die. So once I have enough ink on my die, I'm carefully and very, very carefully placing my die on the paper, and I'm using this washi tape that I was using to hold my die to adhere it to the paper. Now this is very important. You want to make sure to secure your die in place. You don't want it to shift. You really want it to stay in place while you do all the die cutting and embossing. So after you've inked your die and taped it to your paper, you proceed as usual. You just run it through your machine and you die cut, and then you switch to your embossing sandwich and you emboss your die with your paper. Now I do recommend using some heavier paper for this technique. I find that the thicker your paper is, the better results you end up having. So here I have 5 pieces already cut and stamped, and here's another one that I wanted to show you. Now this is the one that I failed to create, and the reason is I added too much ink onto my die. So I pressed my die a bit too much onto the ink pad, and I grabbed too much ink, and that ink ended up spreading all over my die cut piece, into the places where I didn't want. So make sure you experiment first and decide which inks and which ink pads work best for this technique. Now I placed my die cut pieces onto my card base, and I started from the bottom there. I used some foam adhesive, and I simply placed them starting from the bottom, and I alternated, some were facing up and then some were facing down. Now I'm moving on to stamping, and I have this clear stamp from Hero Arts, and it has some really nice sentiments there, and it also has these little like swirl elements. And because it's a larger stamp, I decided I wanted to make it to stamp it in different colors. So I used my washi tape, and I masked the central portion, and I inked those swirly parts with black ink, and I stamped that. And then I cleaned my stamp. Now I'm masking the swirly parts, and I'm leaving the central portion unmasked, and I'm applying different color of ink onto my stamp, and I'm going to stamp that onto my card just to create a stamped image in 2 different colors. Super easy, doesn't take much time, and you don't have to use washi tape for this. You can use painter's tape, or you can use a post-it note for this. I just happen to have a lot of washi tape, so that's why I'm using it. So this is pretty much all for today. My card is all nice and finished, and I really hope that you enjoyed. If you do have the Imperial Gold dies from Spellbinders, be sure to give this technique a try. And if you don't have any, and if you're looking to buy some, make sure to look for a little crown mark on the packaging of the die. This is going to tell you that these dies are the Imperial Gold dies, and I will be sure to include a photo of a packaging on my blog so you can understand better what I'm talking about. So this is all for today. Thank you for watching, and please be sure to like, drop me a comment, and share this video with your friends. Thank you.